Hi people. There's a few videos I want to make, but I'm going to start with this one whilst it's still in my mind. I've just watched troubling BBC reports on the situation of crime in this country. Um, I didn't catch the first bit of the report, but I got the main content. Basically, it was a group of mothers in the town of Chorley in Lancashire um, who got together because they were so frustrated and anxious and fed up with the situation. In all of these cases, their children, their girls, have been violently attacked by youth gangs. And the issue here was that they were saying that the police response to this, when they complained about what happened, was that they wouldn't do anything because the injuries weren't serious enough. So unless the victims had brain damage, arrests wouldn't be made. I should say this is their version of events. The police themselves, there was no interview, but they sent out a message saying that they supported the victims and that arrests had been made. Um, but this actually gets into a big problem, which is that, I mean, it showed some of the footage of this. The mothers wanted the footage to be seen, and it's troubling stuff. You know, you get teenage girls attacking other girls violently, unprovoked, and this isn't just a fight. This is a violent attack by a group. Um, it's one of the most disgusting things I could think of. There's been a lot of focus on male gangs doing that, but you get girls doing it as well. Um, I very much support the principle of joint enterprise, the joint enterprise law. That is to say, if you have a violent attack and a gang is involved, I think every single one of them, unless any of them is trying to hold the others back, should be held jointly responsible. Even if one of them, for example, if it results in a fatality, even if it's one of them that is responsible for directly for the fatality, if the others were joining in on the assault, they should be absolutely held liable as well. Um, but you know, I've been very vocal about my views on sentencing, and I maintain that. Came across a judge the other day at Bradford Crown Court to sentenced a teenager who was driving the wrong way, killed three men. Killed three men. He got 3 years plus free on a suspended license when he comes out. 6 years. But that amounts to 1 year per person. Now, the judge claimed that this wasn't a reflection of the lives. Lives are precious, as he put it. So why such a insanely soft sentence? Even if this guy was remorseful and he'd learned his lesson, three men's lives are gone. Now, I looked up this judge. I don't have Wi-Fi at the moment, so I can't recall his name, but apparently, a few years ago, a woman who had been the victim of a severe domestic violence incident, her abusive husband forced her to drink bleach. Um, this same judge claimed that she wasn't vulnerable, and it attracted a lot of anger at the time. There was a petition, in fact, to get him sacked. So I've been very vocal about the need for judges to be more accountable. Weak, useless judges like that. I think the sentencing is far too soft. I think specifically on youth crime, I think the way this country panders to violent teenagers is a disgrace. Because they know this. There's no deterrent because they know that their age protects them. That has to change. That has to change. We need to get much, much tougher with young offenders because the current approach just is not working. And it's a softly, softly approach. It's not working. But what I really want to speak about specifically in this video, I spoke about sentencing. I spoke about the need for judges to be held to account. I think the parole board and the sentencing council need massively reformed. I think they need to be far more accountable to the public. But I want to speak about policing because I don't think the police come across as totally innocent in this now. In the case of this example in Chorley, they did say that arrests had been made and they'd support the families. But this was just a release statement. They didn't have anyone interviewed. Are they telling the truth? I wish I could say I could believe them, but I just know from my own experience, and mine wasn't anywhere near as serious as this. I had my bike stolen. 7 years ago. Now, the woman at the reception in the police station said, "Oh, it'll probably show up. That usually happens." Whether she really believed that or whether that was just a kind of lie, I'm getting some sort of screenshot coming up, which I did not ask for. That's irritating. It's blocking the screen. Yeah, anyway, she misled me. She said, "Oh, it'll probably be fine." The police came very late that night. I didn't make a big thing of it. They took my statement, the information. I accept that's not an emergency. It's a damn nuisance, but it's not an emergency. But here's the situation. One of the mothers in this case, they showed the injuries her daughter had sustained. Stump marks to the head, severe bruising. And as she put it, if I had done that, I would rightly be arrested immediately. Um, are the police telling the truth? Frankly, I don't believe them. My gut feeling is to believe these mothers because they have seen firsthand the trauma that their children have went through. Well, I mean, why would they lie? Why would they say that the police said this if they didn't? It just wouldn't make any sense. Clearly, they have felt frustrated enough to protest outside the police station. Um, but there should be a basic premise in this country that if you call 999, you expect a response. And you certainly don't expect this dismissive attitude of, well, the injury's not that serious, or basically downplaying a victim statement. I think it's a disgrace. I've had something of an experience of that. I was mugged in Wolverhampton, where I went to university, me and a group of friends. Now, we weren't seriously injured. I think the guys that attacked us were high on something, so they weren't very coordinated. Thankfully, we didn't have serious injuries, but it's still an unpleasant experience. And yeah, when I went to the police station, the whole attitude of the officer was very dismissive. He basically treated me like a nuisance. And I think this is a big problem with a lot of police nowadays. They treat victims of crime as kind of a nuisance. Oh, it's her again. She wants to make this complaint. And, a friend of mine, and I'll keep her name confidential, she's been a victim of domestic violence. Not in the UK, I should say, in the Republic of Ireland. But the Garda have a similar reputation for this sort of dismissiveness. No arrest has been made of her husband, her ex-husband, and just the whole attitude is dismissive. The problem here is police are often the first people that victims of crime will come across, certainly the first people in any position of authority. So when they take this sort of dismissive attitude and when they're telling victims of serious crime, I'm not talking about shoplifting or a bicycle being stolen, which is bad, but these are serious violent assaults against people. When they take that sort of dismissive attitude, how can people have any hope when the police are not acting? Now they might say this isn't what happened. I think, frankly, there is a culture in the police of sort of looking out for themselves and not really telling the truth. I don't think they're entirely honest. I don't. Or they might take the attitude, well, we did make an arrest. Maybe it was a week later, or maybe we sent them. I mean, who knows? They didn't specify, but it could be something like we sent them some links to victim support, and that amounts to the support that they provided. Did they really have a trained officer sitting down with the young girl who was attacked and, really listening to her? Did they? Um, I'm really concerned about this. I'm not a parent, but frankly, the way youth gangs are in this country, um, I'd be more scared of youth gangs than I would of predators, adult predators. And I'm not saying that isn't a problem, but honestly, youth gangs are out of control in this country. They really are. And what hope is there if the public have no empowerment? It comes back to this issue of empowerment. People have no faith in the police because if they're not busy checking up Twitter feuds, it's just this situation where they don't seem to care. And there's always this counter, well, they're under pressure. And what about police cuts, right? So maybe the police will say it's down to numbers. But if that's the issue, they would have specified that. I think they just find victims of crime a nuisance. And I think they have the procedure that they will follow. And then they think, oh, well, that's fine. And they're kind of resting on their laurels, really. So, what hope is there for parents who are in the situation, whose children, or for anyone for that matter? I mean, it's awful, whoever it happens to. But from a parent's point of view, they feel powerless, and they actually took to patrolling the park themselves. Of course, what would happen? If a youth gang attacked their child and they physically defended them, they would be charged. This is perverse. This is a disgrace. The law must immediately change. Adults should be legally allowed to protect their children or themselves in a case of clear self defense. The law should not be that if a 40-year-old um, hits a 16-year-old in self defense, they get charged for it if it's clearly a case of self defense. It should not be a case that the 16-year-old laughs and says, "Oh, my age protects me." I think that's abhorrent. My younger sister and her friend were attacked a few years ago. At the time, they would have been in their early 20s, but they were attacked by a group of teenagers. One of these teenage boys attacked her pregnant friend. When they went to the police, now my sister said in that case the police were sympathetic, but they said that had they defended themselves, they would have been charged. This is insane. This is utterly insane, where British citizens are not given the right to legally protect themselves from teenage gangs. I think parenting's a huge part of it, but people are not empowered. And young offenders have too many rights, quite frankly. Too many rights. Not named for legal reasons. Well, I can understand that before a trial in order not to prejudice the case. But after a verdict, yeah, I think they should be named so people know to look out for them. It's so disillusioning and frustrating. The issue of police cuts, it may be part of the reason here. It may be that the police simply don't have the resources to deal with every crime at once. But at the very least, they should be showing more sympathy to victims and they shouldn't take this dismissive attitude of, well, we'll make arrests if it's more serious. That's pretty damn serious as it is. A bunch of strangers attacking a young girl, stamping on her head. I mean, they're basically seem to be saying that unless she is killed or left hospitalized, then we're not going to do anything, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a bloody disgrace. It's cowardly, it's inefficient, it's useless, it's incompetent, and the police need to explain this. Um, the reason I don't really believe their excuse that they did do this is if if they feel this is totally untrue, I think they would actually go to the point of getting a spokesperson to really, they would be interested in protecting the reputation. I'm guessing they know it's true. They know that they were caught out and they'll, oh, well, release this press statement and people will move on. That's a disgrace. So I'm not anti-police. I've often defended the police. I've defended them, for example, in cases of stop or search in London. We've had a group of people surround them and say racism when they're just doing their job. I do think the police have a very difficult job, but I think sometimes they do themselves no favours. I think they could have a better attitude to victims of crime for a start. And I think that ultimately, whilst they are in a difficult job, it's a job that they have chosen. They have chosen to be public servants. And the people expect them to act. The people expect that when they report a crime, it will be taken seriously. And this is the great paradox. The police themselves always say, you have to report this, you have to report this, ostensibly to see the data. But they must understand that the public are utterly disillusioned when they're actually reporting crimes and the police do nothing about it. If it is an issue about numbers, certainly the Tory government should take a lot of blame in that. I do think it's a little bit of an excuse, though. I'm not sure it's always about numbers. Another excuse that's often used, especially for youth gangs, is, oh, well, the Tories shut all the youth clubs, so that explains it. Being bored is reasonable people, people who can tell right from wrong, don't attack strangers because they're bored. So there's something deeper. Just saying youth clubs have closed. I mean, it doesn't help. Certainly doesn't help. That's not a good thing. I think having youth facilities is obviously important. But I don't really accept this argument that, well, youth clubs are closed, so that explains youth crime, and it serves as an excuse. There's no excuse, none. Young offenders have to stop thinking they can say, oh, well, there's nothing for the youth to do. And it's irresponsible, weak adults, frankly, not putting down the law. Uh, it could be parenting, it could be. I really do feel that those people who advocate neo leniency, who, no matter how serious the situation, their knee jerk reaction is always to question punishment, it's always to question. to question the very need to hold young offenders to account. I think they're a big part of the problem. I think they're a barrier to justice. I think they are they're putting up a wall to victims of crime. I think their position is an insult to victims of crime. But all of this, this lack of trust in the police, disillusion with the legal system, disillusion with sentencing. People are totally powerless. What can you do about a weak judge? You can write to the Attorney General. The chances of anything changing are minimal. The only way a judge can be struck off is professional misconduct. That is, for example, if they're committing an offence themselves, or if, for example, there's a trial and they're messing around with a juror, something like that. But judges are not held to account for the weakness. Consistently soft judges get away with it. I think that's wrong. So there's a whole range of factors here. I think the situation in this country is getting out of control. I'm not going to say we have the highest crime levels we've ever had. I don't know that to be true. Maybe it's not. Maybe they were higher in the 90s or the 80s. But clearly, we're in a bad situation here because young offenders are basically doing as they please. And it's not just young offenders, older offenders as well. But the difference is young offenders know that their age protects them. At least with adult offenders, there's a chance that they'll face real justice. There's a chance. And at least with criminals, if people defend themselves, they're not going to be prosecuted for it, or less likely so. Um, but I really think anyone involved in law and justice needs to understand the public perception here. That includes the police. The police can't keep blaming the government and saying they're simply following guidelines. No, a lot of this is their decision. When senior police superintendents choose to put their officers on extensive diversity courses or go to someone's home to police Twitter feuds, it's not even a crime. This is the thing. By their own admission, these are non-crime offences. So why the hell are the police wasting time on it? If this is an issue about resources, instead of going to someone's house because they said something naughty on Twitter, um, they should be going to victims like these girls in Chorley. They should be absolutely prioritizing something like that. I mean, that's a pretty serious offense. Violent assault. Why are they not acting on it? Or why are they doing so little? It's a damn disgrace. So, Chorley Police, if you happen to be watching this, I'm not convinced by your response. I've been a victim of crime. I don't live in Chorley, but I have huge sympathy with these mothers. And hopefully, this is why a free press is so, so important in a democracy. Without that BBC report, I wouldn't know about it. Now the reporter did say this is just one town. It might be a localized situation. I don't think it is. I think people across the country have similar problems. In fact, there was that case in Fiona Pilkington and her daughter. I remember it well because it really troubled me at the time. It was in Leicestershire. Now, she and her daughter, who had serious learning difficulties, had been tormented by youth gang for years. She reported it, the police done nothing. They ended up having to make a formal apology. But sadly, she took her life and then the life of her daughter because they had been so broken by what these youth gangs were doing to them. Leicestershire Police or Leicestershire Constabulary basically done nothing. I think the police need to stop treating victims of crime as a nuisance. They need to act. They need to understand that when people report serious crimes, they expect action. They expect arrests to be made, or at the very least, the police to be reaching out to them, giving them updates about what's happening, reassuring them. It's. I just don't think that's happening. And I'm not going to vilify all police. I'm not going to say all police are useless. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But I think there's just too many examples of this. So I do think there's a problem with policing culture in Britain today. Of course, the other side of it is you get corrupt cops and you get those abusing their power. You get examples of police brutality. I've always said police who break the law should be arrested. They should be treated as criminals. They should not be protected by their uniform. And police forces should not be protecting their own just because they are fellow police officers. I think the Metropolitan Police is rotten. I think some of the things that have emerged recently, for example, officers joking about rape victims, um, they're not fit to wear the uniform. They should be kicked out without any pensions. Um, kicked out unceremoniously in disgrace. People like that should not be wearing a uniform. People who cannot bring themselves to feel empathy for victims of crime and who even think it's appropriate to joke about victims of crime. They're a disgrace. They shouldn't be wearing the uniform. So I think there needs to be much better vetting. You know, when I tried to join the Royal Navy Reserves, it was quite rigid, and it should be. It should be. But the medical tests were extensive. The vetting was quite rigid. Now, I'm not sure if this is happening sufficiently in the police. Um, I think one of the main priorities, there's obvious things, courage is important, um, having wit, tenacity, energy. There's all sorts of things that are important. Sympathy for victims should be one of the highest things because I don't think this is a trivial thing because police officers are often the first people that victims of crime will interact with, apart from maybe their friends or family. So I think officers need to be trained to treat victims with absolute sympathy, and really have an understanding of the anger and the frustration and the fear that a victim of crime will be going through, and their need for to see something being done. Right, I'll round this up because my Wi-Fi keeps going, and I want to try and upload it tonight. Thanks for watching.